Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Kirschbaum. I'm with the Sports Video Group, editorial director. We are here to discuss remote production, the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the sports production community, and also new workflows that have been developed. And then we're going to spin forward mostly for this conversation and look to the future as opposed to look to the past. I have a great panel discussion with James, Robert, Daragh, and Dominic from Sportcast, TV Skyline, Sky Sports, and NEP Media Solutions. James, I want to start with you from Sky Sports. You are sitting in probably the most unique place we've had any panelists talk with us before. So where are you exactly right now?
Yeah, so hi Ken, hi everyone. Yeah, you actually joined me in the offices, so I've not been in over the last year, hardly at all, but a rare occurrence. I've actually come in and I'm sat in what we call Replay 2, which was an area we built over last summer. So kind of brief history. As we went into lockdown, we took the work that we've been doing over the last 5 years in remote production, and we had turned the EFL remote, our second tier football remote in 2019, along with our friends at NEP. And as we went into COVID, once we had stopped messing around in vMix for a couple of months, which was great fun and a lot of learnings there, and we had to then align ourselves to get us back with returning of sport, and in particular returning of the Premier League. We needed to get on and create some new workflows and taking the EFL model of remote production with limited travel, keeping as many people as we could either at home or safe in our building here was going to be key to us. So we took that model and did a temporary solution with NEP using some studio floors, and built a couple of galleries on the studio floor, a bit of replay. But as we progressed through the season, and we did 100 games in 40 days across our football, and with pretty much 100% perfection, it's an incredible feat. The teams that had worked to get that temporary solution then turned it into a permanent solution, and this is part of it. This is the replay room. So this is where the EVS operators and the coordinator, the AP that controls the AP sits. And at the moment, we're still operating in a world with separation, with the panels, the perspex in between everybody, and they would all be wearing masks. And here I'm on my own, and here there's no football today. We're just doing some secret testing by looks of it in the background. So hopefully these will be removed at some point over the coming summer. But yes, this is an area that was built in just a few months, converted from being something that we don't think we're going to need in the future, which I'm sure we'll come on to.
Sure, excellent. So quick question as far as how has your team adjusted to these new ways of working? What's been the feedback from your teams?
So the outstanding feedback is that working at a business like Sky during a time like this has proved why we're immensely proud of the teams. Our ability to be able to take a problem and come up with a solution in a short period of time. It's really brought the teams together. We did some restructuring a couple of years ago to bring the collaboration across the sport, editorial, production operations, and then the technical crafts that support that, the studio management, to bring them much better together. And the biggest piece of feedback I'd say is that the collaboration now is like nothing we've seen before. The ability for teams to come together and solve the problem is incredible, and that all the associated benefits that come with the well-being of the less travel with the remote, the way that the people can be heard in the meetings, that there can be more relevant people in a larger meeting now, really I think helps people feel that their part to play within the business is much more than it would have been before. We would have been a much more top-down decision making, and whereas we have a kind of new structure around how we make decisions quickly in Sky now in order to be able to be agile, it does mean that far more people can contribute towards that. So I think we've created a bigger sense of collaboration. We've created a better well-being, far less travel. We've still managed to maintain some regional aspects. So with NEP Connect and NEP, we worked out a replay centre up in Manchester, so we didn't alienate people around the country by reducing our travel. So we've still managed to get a larger workforce across our sports. And then we're obviously have a high priority around our sustainability, and clearly any move to remote cuts our carbon at the same time. So I'd say the feedback is pretty much always positive. There are aspects of visiting grounds, venues that people will miss, but we're not depriving the chance to do that. It's just much more reduced now. And I think still the overriding problem that people find is still the restriction of being at home most of the time, which as that lifts over the coming months, I think that will be the remaining kind of bugbear people have with our current workflows will get lifted. We can't have everyone we want in this space, and in our galleries we still have to separate people into different areas. So some of the graphics areas are still separated. As soon as we get them back in the same working area, then I think they'll benefit from that as well.
Great. So Dom, obviously Sportcast at the center of Bundesliga, and all the eyes of the world were literally on you last March. So as you were doing the similar efforts that James did and learning new things, whether you wanted to or not, where's Sportcast now as for this season, as far as the workflows, and what do you think is going to kind of stick around?
So of course we are working under the conditions of this hygiene concept we had beginning with March last season, and there was slight things we had to amend, but basically we are working on the same basis. And this is for the host production, where we have still some restrictions regarding the division of the sporting and the media sector, of course. That we have some changes of camera positions where we have to go back to the tribune. And for especially me and the international production, we doing in Cologne at the central production center. There are of course changes, and we were facing some challenges regarding travel restrictions. Usually our commentators come over from US or from the UK to do our live production or near live production. We had to find solutions there. So we set up a remote commentary solution. We started in March last year with a kind of studio remote production from London. In the meantime, we switched, because this had been very big efforts for bringing videos in and out and so on. We now switched to another construct that allowed us to bring the commentators from their home remotely to our live productions. So we provide them commentary units. We bring audio and video streams to them. We have communication, talkback situations. We have experts involved, so that we have our usual dual commentary. And so we are able to do 5, 6, or 7 games per match day, remotely commentated from UK or as well from US, and that worked out very fine so far. Of course, there are challenges regarding the delays you have to deal with. That everything is fine for the final distribution, that video and audio comes at the same time. But in the end, we found procedures that are dealing with this very well. And so I think this will be one of the things that will stay as well for the future, because it brings a lot of more flexibility for the planning of the commentators. You can bring them in for only one match in the afternoon. They don't have to travel and stay overnight and go back Sundays or whatever. So this will be a thing that stays with us for the next time as well.
And
of course,
okay. Are they okay with this?
Yes. So we were thinking of solutions like this, of course, already before.
Right.
But now these things and these situations we are all facing has had a little bit more pressure. And so we went faster to these kind of solutions. And so it was nothing completely new. And in the end, of course, we will take care that the people come in as well in the future, because you have to keep this personal contact, of course.
Right.
But for the usual work, the operational work for the weekends and the match day is so some parts can be done remotely, without any problems.
Do you find that one of the similarities between the American football and the global football is that there's a lot that's happening. If you're just looking at the screen, the TV screen, you're not seeing all the players on the pitch or the field. And there's a lot of stuff going off the wings of the screen. And if you're commentating, I've heard for both sports, it can be challenging because you don't quite know where people are. Do you give the commentators a wide shot of something so they can kind of get a sense of the context of the whole field and the whole pitch?
Yeah, so you have to know that all the live commentary we're doing for the international product portfolio is done already before on this remote thing. So they were not sitting in the stadium. It's all done from Cologne, and they have additional feeds, of course, at least the Camera One feed, where they are allowed to gain more information out of the screen than only the people sitting on the TV screen in front of the TV screen. So they get a lot of information via additional video feeds. Of course, we have a connection to the stadium, to the director on site, and getting a lot of information from there, so that we have more information than the usual audience.
Excellent. So James, what's your take, James, from the commentary standpoint, looking towards next season? What do you have plans at this point? What has been the feedback?
Well, with football, with the way that we've been working on all of our leagues, we've managed to maintain commentary from the stadium. By transitioning the rest of our workflow, we were able to keep the minimum number of people on site, which still allowed our commentary to get on site. And it being a relatively small country, and having some regional aspects with our commentators, it wasn't too much of a mission to get them to the venues, and we weigh up the benefits of them doing the off-tube style versus that peripheral vision, working with their ability to see around substitutions and stuff. We look to the benefit of that. What we didn't do immediately, or we scaled back a lot, was the presentation on site. We pulled that a lot back to the studio, and that was also a mix of the sheer volume of games that we had to do. We had to cover an unprecedented number of games in a short period of time, and continue to do an unprecedented number of games now. So the very fact we're doing game to game to game just meant that our talent wouldn't have been able to even make it between everywhere anyway. So the on-screen presentation was very much back at Sky, and the commentary we managed to maintain on site. And we debated that balance. There are other sports where we golf, for example, where the travel is a completely different ball game, where we've been doing distributed commentary with it from either Florida through anywhere in the States, working with people in the UK and at Sky Studios. It works differently in our different sports, but with football we stayed with commentary, and we'll continue to stay, I believe, with commentary from the venue.
Excellent. So Robert and Daragh, thank you for your patience, by the way. But you've both learned so much. That's the good news, right? So Robert, I want to start with you from the German perspective. What the big key question, and Daragh will discuss this as well, is what is the future of trucks on site? Are there going to be decentralized productions where some of the crews working remotely? What's going on in Germany from your perspective as far as TV Skyline and your clients and customers?
I think if you're looking for a trend, how will be the OB for the future? It's always difficult to say, because every company has its own agenda, different requirements, different clients. Also, if you're making the same production, every company has a different way of working and workflows. So I think I can speak for a lot of OB companies. We have in the same week different clients, different tasks, and different requirements every week. So if you have a larger OB truck, which is a little bit more spacious and a little bit more power in it, you have more flexibility. So, and we all know that space for an OB truck is quite luxury. So, and all clients we know really take advantage of a big and spacious truck. So, I do not think that there will be a trend for smaller trucks so far, because when there will be a after Corona mode, we will, I think, in Germany switch back to the pre-Corona mode, where we all have a truck which is full, and we all know the phenomenon. If you have a medium-sized production going with a medium-sized truck, it's full. If you go to the same medium-sized production with a bigger truck, it's full with people on the production. And if you go to the same production with a very XXL truck, wow, where the people came. Everybody wants to have a seat in the truck. So I think you will still have big trucks, and you will still need a lot of space in trucks, not only to work, but to have these multi-purpose rooms where you have graphics or EVS or your clients making meetings or whatever.
Yes. So Daragh, I know I spoke with Brian Clark from your team earlier this week about the Gray's Inn facility, Gray's Inn Road in London. You know, and Brian, I'm sure you're the same way. All in NAP. You know, your goal at NAP right now is to give people plenty of options, because there is no one answer going forward, right? I think, and you want to maybe discuss this as far as, because I think everyone's looking to say, well, this is the way it's going to be in the future. But to Robert's point, you know, you all are building facilities that are looking for clients, so you have to have maximum flexibility in that facility. If you make your trucks too small, you're going to end up losing part of your potential market share, what have you. So what's your sense of football production in this sort of mix? I mean, are people who are looking for the way that things are going to be done kind of not putting their energy in the right place, that it will be maximum flexibility for whatever you need to do?
Yeah, so hi everybody. I think modularity is key. So even within, say, one particular client, there's many different ways of doing it. And that'll depend on the tiering or the priority of the match, you know, which people need to go to site, which don't. And then when you look across multiple clients, there's definitely different demands from different areas. So for us, we've been doing a lot of remote stuff and full on kind of this centralized production models. Is slightly to confuse things, because a lot of people talk about decentralized. But when I speak centralized, I mean specifically about technology, and centralizing technology in kind of a data center model. And what we've been doing that, say, in Australia, for example, the hubs out there, I think since 2018. So from a technology perspective, a lot of this has been done for a long time. I think what we've seen over the last year is that, as I mentioned before, that modularity. Different people want different bits, and they want to assemble them in whatever way, you know, to suit their particular production, that particular production workflow. So in the past, we used to build a truck to try and cater for all of those different areas. And that made it really difficult. It probably also drove up the cost of the truck, and therefore drove up the costs to the end clients, you know, because we needed to cover that cost. What we've been able to do is try and streamline that a little bit, and centralizing some of the technologies. And then we've allowed it to, it means that, you know, for example, we can send trucks to site, which are just doing the capture element, sending video signals back to, for example, you know, the partnership that we do with James and the team at Sky, you know, where we can contribute cameras back in, but the replay, for example, may be based in Australia, or maybe based in an NAP facility, you know, which is further north. You know, so there's a real mix and match, I suppose, from our perspective. And yeah, because everybody has slightly different demands, and those demands change as the weeks and months continue. And I think that's probably flexibility is the best approach.
Right. And I guess, you know, to Robert's point, and to Brian's point in the conversation, you know, the reality is if you're doing a 12 to 15 camera shoot for any event, you pretty much, whether you're doing it remotely or on site, you need the same amount of people. You need the same amount of people, overall in the production. So it's just a matter of whether they're on site or working remotely. So Robert, as far as from TV Skyline, and obviously it's fascinating from an American perspective, looking into Europe, you know, obviously there are OB companies that are sort of very much focused on their own country. Do you see the need, and I will reference, going back to like about a year or two ago when we'd had these conversations in the UK and talk with Daragh and James, remote production in the UK, a lot of people are like, well, our country's small enough. We don't really necessarily have to do a lot of remote production and such. So we don't mind being on site. Robert, in Germany, is that the same philosophy that being on site will be the preference?
I think for the big events, for the big piece of meat, the German Bundesliga, the fillet of the sports production, yes, for sure, or the Champions League. But there will be more remote productions in the future. For example, at the moment, we're doing a a reality hospital format for 7 weeks from our Skyline remote center here based in Mainz. So all cameras are remote controlled. We do the sound mixing, the intercom via the Skyline remote center, and we only have 2 colleagues on site just checking if everything is okay. So this is not a live format. It's going in the post-production and reality. But a few years ago, nobody would have done this remotely in Germany.
Right. So Daragh, another, you mentioned sort of the big trucks and then how those are more costly. What's your sense as far as, and I'm going off script, so I apologize. What I find, and for all of you, what I find fascinating about what's going on right now is if I was a smaller client of yours, between virtualized technologies, cloud-based systems, there's the potential for me, even at a smaller budget, to make my show look a lot better than, let's say, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. What's your sense as far as how what's going on broader in an industry is just going to raise the quality of production? And then Dom and James, I'm going to hit you up with the same question.
Yeah, well, definitely the thresholds have lowered. You know what I mean? There's software-based solutions now that are doing things that we probably couldn't dreamt of 3-4 years ago. All-in-one software solutions that you can even run in the cloud. I think we've seen over the last year some of them being pushed to their limit. With broadcasters, and we're technical innovators. It's the content creators who always push the boundaries a little bit, and always want to get a bit more out of the box as such. We've seen that to great effect. There's some really great programming. I do think there's time and a place, and there's times when you move up through the tiers of production that there are some production tools that still make sense. And there is a differentiator there between kind of the all-in-one kind of production solution, and then when you step it up to kind of more discrete boxes with different functionalities. Areas like replay, for example. There's some certain things that our replay operators can do. Working in that environment is very different to the sort of the all-in-one operation where it's kind of instant queues and stuff. But the threshold has definitely been lowered. I think the big thing for me is probably seeing not so much just about technology though, but about the people, and actually getting, as James touched on it earlier on a little bit, the conversations have started to flow a bit more, I believe, between the technical teams and the creative teams. We've seen creatives getting hands-on with the technology over the last year a lot. I think that's only a positive thing, because, a risk of letting engineers design solutions forever. We make television to make entertaining content. I think that's really, important that we get that hands-on time and that they drive the innovation, as opposed to, for a long time, we could drive IP and 4K and HDR. We will do all those things, but it's actually been really good to see some of the clever creative content come out as well.
Right. Yeah, James, as far as your pivot, you mentioned vMix earlier and, cloud-based systems. So what is your sense as far as your ability to drive a lot more quality into production in a very cost-effective manner? Yeah,
so there's a couple of points I'll pick up that have been discussed there. So if we went back again 5 years, I would have hoped our industry was going to move itself to a consistent remote model where you would have great bandwidth everywhere, and you'd pick your sport and you'd bring all the signals back to your headquarters and create your content there. And we had been heading down that route with some of our key sports. We weren't expecting to do the Premier League, by the way, until maybe the next right cycle. Maybe we were being cautious back then. Our top tier Super Gold Premier League. Surely we won't be doing that remote for years yet. But when we discovered that we could move so quickly from doing the EFL and scaling it up to do the Premier League, and we got all our content out, and actually it was enriched. We could do more because we were based in this building. We had everything available to us, how we integrate with sports news, how we integrate with our digital, what are other assets. It really showed that we could explode in that. And it wasn't a fact of the production team could still in the future go on site if they want to spend time with their key commentator from game to game. But it's talking about the mass of people not being going on site. What we also then found though is that we still have when we opened up some of these new platforms for the teams, they found ways of creating shows that didn't even exist before. So the main one being the ability to bring new contributors into vMix, because it doesn't matter where they are. The public accepting that as a form of television to start with, because of the quality was a huge step forward, and that continues to this day. I think even after lockdown is lifted, we will continue to use the 4-box contributors thing, because we can bring new talent in without having to transit them around the country or around the world. And then there's the other, it's always a difficult word to use when you use efficiency, but things like V-Box become a new platform completely of how you produce. So when you talk about a remote production needs the same number of people, it depends how you're using that facility, how often it's used during the day, how many matches are going through it. And then you come onto the facilities like the V-Box where there's a different number of people involved, where you can make a whole production. You can make them now look as good as a full gallery, because they're a kind of form of automation. Automation's a kind of a bit of a dirty word sometimes, but you can get more out of those boxes through a structured template system. And we've really enriched some of our shows. And whether I talk about before that we wanted one consistent way of making television, we must have created about 50 different methods now. And our problem is that as we go out to market and try and communicate that for suppliers to provide the front end of that, we're trying to now bring it back into something communicable, because we have the Premier League as full remote, bring all the signals back. The Formula One is a different style of pods that come in. We have the golf now where we have a remote surface remote as the other form of terminology, where you're controlling the box from a distance instead of bringing signals back. We have vMix, we have virtualized. And it's effectively making sure we have the right people in our building to communicate to our editorial team. This is probably the best thing for you to use to get the most out of your show. So it's a big suite of facilities. And we want to make sure we have a sustainable market to help us provide those facilities, and we don't just end up with a load of specialist companies doing little bits here and there for us.
Right. Well, you mentioned the next rights cycle, and nobody heard this from me, but supposedly the NFL, when they did their new deal in the US for 10 years, one of the things they've stipulated in their contract is they need the producer, the director, and the announcers on site, which is very interesting, fascinating. So, but no one heard that from me. That's
interesting.
Yeah. So Dom, why don't you take us home as far as, from your perspective, looking to all these new technologies, and what do you think it means for all your rights holders around the world?
So what I think when we get a step back, if we doing more remotely or not, so I think it doesn't clash, because our demands are always increasing. We want more in one show. The live show should be bigger, and there should be more services included. So even if we do more remote services in the future, it doesn't mean that we have less efforts on site. So this means that the OB vans are still there, but they are dealing with the same things or more things, and the additional services, we can't bring them all into the venue. So we have to deal with them to be able to have parts of it on a remote basis, of course. And so when you're talking about the broadcast partners, of course, what we are doing as well for the moment is to have these remote live interviews, because in the moment our international licensing partners are not able to go to the venue, to have their own ENG crew there, to have their own commentators in the stadium. And most important thing for them is to have their unilateral live interviews afterwards. So we implemented as well this remote live interview situation, where they are able remotely to get from their studio situation or from wherever to bring in and to talk to their players shortly after the match, to do the live interviews for the unilateral shows. And this is as well one thing what we learned that could be there as well after Corona. When we have after Corona, because they don't have to send reporters around the world for only having 5 minutes interviews in the stadium. So this is a situation we learned, our partners learned. That's great. It's a big gain to have the live interviews without being on site. And so this is one of the things they of course are getting, and they are happy with it, that they are getting these unilateral interviews, even if they can't be there with some accreditations or own cameras.
Yeah, I mean, you're hearing that already. I think on a lot of movie stars talking about their media tours, they're like, "Why am I going to want to go to a hotel and for 3 and go around the world as opposed to sit at home?" So, really appreciate your time, gentlemen. On behalf of football fans and sports fans around the world, I mean, I think it is amazing what you have all accomplished since last March. I mean, it's sad that it's still going on, but when you think back to the darkness of last March and just the concern that we'd all still be here on this planet if this went on for a year, I think it's amazing that what you've all done, and the fact that the productions have just looked spectacular. I mean, I would have thought HDR would have gone out the window, UHD out the window. We're doing 4 camera shoots. It's been amazing. So congratulations and thank you.